World War II Soviet Union. In World War II, the Battle of Stalingrad, the largest and bloodiest battle in the history of warfare, ended in 1943 with a decisive Soviet victory against the German army. The Soviet Union entered World War II on 17 September 1939 with its invasion of Poland in accordance with a secret protocol within the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Nazi Germany. The Soviet Union later invaded Finland and occupied and annexed the Baltic states, as well as parts of Romania. On 22 June 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union, opening the Eastern Front, the largest theater of World War II. Eventually, some 5 million Red Army troops were captured by the Nazis. The latter deliberately starved to death or otherwise killed 3.3 million Soviet POWs and a vast number of civilians as the Hunger Plan sought to fulfill Generalplanast. Although the Wehrmacht had considerable early success, their attack was halted in the Battle of Moscow. Subsequently, the Germans were dealt major defeats, first at the Battle of Stalingrad in the winter of 1942-1943, and then in the Battle of Kursk in the summer of 1943. Another German failure was the siege of Leningrad, in which the city was fully blockaded on land between 1941 and 1944 by German and Finnish forces, and suffered starvation and more than 1 million deaths, but never surrendered. Soviet forces steamrolled through Eastern and Central Europe in 1944-1945 and captured Berlin in May 1945. In August 1945, the Red Army invaded Manchuria and ousted the Japanese from Northeast Asia, contributing to the Allied victory over Japan. The 1941-1945 period of World War II is known in Russia as the Great Patriotic War. The Soviet Union, along with the United States, the United Kingdom and China, were considered the Big Four of Allied powers in World War II, and later became the Four Policemen, which was the foundation of the United Nations Security Council. During the war, Soviet civilian and military deaths were about 26-27 million, accounting for about half of all World War II casualties. The Soviet economy and infrastructure suffered massive devastation, which caused the Soviet famine of 1946-1947. However, at the expense of a large sacrifice, the Soviet Union emerged as a global superpower. Cold War. The Big Three at the Yalta Conference in February 1945, Winston Churchill, Franklin D. Roosevelt and Joseph Stalin. After World War II, parts of Eastern and Central Europe, including East Germany and eastern parts of Austria, were occupied by Red Army according to the Potsdam Conference. Dependent communist governments were installed in the Eastern Bloc satellite states. After becoming the world's second nuclear power, the Soviet Union established the Warsaw Pact alliance and entered into a struggle for global dominance, known as the Cold War, with rivaling United States and NATO. After Stalin's death in 1953, in a short period of collective rule, the new leader Nikita Khrushchev denounced Stalin and launched the policy of de-Stalinization, releasing many political prisoners from the Gulag labor camps. The general easement of repressive policies became known later as the Khrushchev Thaw. At the same time, Cold War tensions reached its peak when the two rivals clashed over the deployment of the United States Jupiter missiles in Turkey and Soviet missiles in Cuba. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched the world's first artificial satellite, Sputnik 1, thus starting the space age. Russian cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit the Earth aboard the Vostok 1 manned spacecraft on 12 April 1961. Following the ousting of Khrushchev in 1964, another period of collective rule ensued until Leonid Brezhnev became the leader. The era of the 1970s and the early 1980s was later designated as the era of stagnation. The 1965 Kosygin reform aimed for partial decentralization of the Soviet economy. In 1979, after a communist-led revolution in Afghanistan, Soviet forces invaded the country, ultimately starting the Soviet-Afghan War. In May 1988, the Soviets started to withdraw from Afghanistan due to international opposition, persistent anti-Soviet guerrilla warfare, and a lack of support by Soviet citizens. From 1985 onwards, the last Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, who sought to enact liberal reforms in the Soviet system, introduced the policies of glasnost, openness, and perestroika restructuring in an attempt to end the period of economic stagnation and to democratize the government. This, however, led to the rise of strong nationalist and separatist movements across the country. Prior to 1991, the Soviet economy was the world's second largest, but during its final years, it went into a crisis. By 1991, economic and political turmoil began to boil over as the Baltic states chose to secede from the Soviet Union. On 17 March, a referendum was held in which the vast majority of participating citizens voted in favor of changing the Soviet Union into a renewed federation. In June 1991, Boris Yeltsin became the first directly elected president in Russian history when he was elected president of the Russian SFSR. In August 1991, a coup d'état attempt by members of Gorbachev's government, directed against Gorbachev and aimed at preserving the Soviet Union, instead led to the end of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. On 25 December 1991, following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, along with contemporary Russia, 14 other post-Soviet states emerged. Early history. The first human settlement on Russia dates back to the Oldowan period in the early Lower